morning, ECOS line team. Brent Jeffries, Vice President, Field Operations and Safety Instructor with Bierer. We're bringing you again another, what are we, Dwight? We're 56?
56, man.
56. Mr. Dwight Miller, my brother from Ohio's Electric Cooperatives. We appreciate Ohio Electric Cooperative for sponsoring Dwight's travels and his sharing with you today. Dwight has shared with us a couple of years ago. Yeah, GUAGES, how you measure safety. Get that. That's a great Lineman Safety National webinar. And Mr. Dwight spent most of the day yesterday driving here from Ohio. And he's got some other business we're going to talk about here in just a minute. But he's going to be bringing you avoiding unintended consequences in the evolution of safety. So I'm excited to hear this. This is a topic that we haven't had anything that's even close to it. So this is going to be a really good one. I recognize a few of you folks that are joining in here on the live line. You're welcome to type in any questions, and we'll get to those questions later on. Mr. Dwight will help you out. And I've known you, Dwight, since when I first met you, North Dakota? Was that North Dakota?
I think you said Christie's on.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
Christie.
at Christie's conference is where we met. So
real, that's right. Dang, North Dakota. That was several years ago, and I met you face to face, and I think we had a nice little dinner there.
Yeah,
breaking some bread.
Yeah,
so this is a great thing. We have over 14,000 members now with Electric Culture of Safety. Go to electriccultureofsafety.com, and we're populating it. In fact, our videographer here today, Mr. Jeremy, he's going to be helping populating that with some clips. And you guys can ask questions, but appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you, man. So Mr. Dwight, he came in and tell us, man, you're going to be visiting some of your crews. What Ohio's Electric Cooperatives? Tell us what's going on with the storm restoration. What you guys are all about right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that the ones on, have a lot going on too with the Hurricane Helene, and then now we got Milton, right? Coming in as a Category 5, and so anyway, we have 87 guys working south right now, and so at 4 different locations. I got one crew only working probably about an hour and a half from here. One group. We got, I think there's 15 guys in that group, but we're working at 4 different electric cooperatives, 1 in South Carolina and 3 in North Carolina, and so. Yeah, so anyway, I'm going to try to stop by and get to see some of the crews that we actually just shifted into French Broad Electric Cooperative yesterday. And so this morning is the first opening with everybody there. Everybody's on site and ready to go to work there. And so that's where the worst devastation is. There for the cooperatives is where French Broad is. So
Mr. Dwight, he's got his guys here, North Carolina, spread out around, helping out mutual assistance here in the restoration, which is North Carolina is really bad. Parts of Georgia near Augusta is really bad. We had a lot of damage here, even in the Columbia, South Carolina area. This far away, it's amazing. So I know, Dwight, you said you wanted to just say a quick prayer.
I would like to do that.
All right.
Yeah.
So go ahead, brother.
All right, man. Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you, God, for the privilege, Lord, just being in this industry, Lord. And we just bring up to you the linemen that are working all across the Carolinas, Georgia, just Tennessee, everywhere that the damage is. Lord, we just pray that your protection over them. Lord, we pray that they would make good decisions. We pray that they would not take shortcuts. Lord, we pray that the schemes that the enemy has against them would be foiled, Lord, and that your angels would protect them, Lord. And we thank you for their willingness to come help, Lord. And we pray, Lord, for those that are about to get hit, Lord, by this next hurricane, Lord. We just pray protection over the families, Lord. And we pray, God, that, Lord, you would have mercy on this nation. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, so appreciate everybody taking that moment. It's super important. But Dwight, tell us about you coming into line work a long time ago. I mean, you're kind of an old guy. So
not any older than you.
That's true.
2 months.
2 months. So tell us that journey. Tell us a little bit about that, and now here you are today. Go through that with us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started back in '85. Was when I first started on the line crew, and I I saw two really bad accidents in 1986. One was life-changing when I did a rescue on a guy that was burnt very badly on a pole. So that was crazy. Didn't sleep for 2 weeks. It just really messed me up. And so when I saw the second contact, I was actually planning to get out of line work. I wouldn't have been here today, but it was actually a seasoned lineman came up to me and said, "Hey man, I think there's a good career for you in this field." And it's the only reason I stayed in was because of the words of somebody. And I think we don't take into account how important our words are sometimes, Brent. Actually in my devotion, I write a devotional every day, Monday to Friday. I write a devotional, and anyway, today in the devotional today, it was actually about our words through John 12. And so but our words are really powerful, and we can do a lot of destruction with them, and we can do a lot of good with them, And so anyway, and that's the reason why I'm here today. And so anyway, stayed in. I was contracting from 85 to 94, got into the co-op, so in 94. It took me 9 years to get on with the local co-op. Finally got on with them in 94, and then ended up becoming a supervisor at that co-op, and then I ended up taking over the training, the apprenticeship and the training for Ohio's Electric Cooperatives in 2007. Then I ended up becoming director of the department, safety training, loss prevention in 2013. So I've been doing this since, and so, yeah, so that's 39 years in, man. So that's kind of how it adds up. So
I've been to your facility, your training facility, the training facility there in Ohio, and you gave me a tour, the outside and the indoor portion of it. And believe me, folks, this facility that Dwight has helped create and build for Ohio's Electric Cooperatives, it is state-of-the-art indoors and outdoors. Give us just some of that inclination of how that process took care of, and a little bit of inspiration, the name, and all that.
Yeah. Okay. We had a 16-acre pole farm that we did a lot of training in, and anyway, well, just to make a long story short, we ended up building a $1 million indoor facility back in 2017, which they say now would be about $3 million, $2.5 million, the same would be. But anyway, and that was amazing, and so. We built stations all around it, and so we have our stations that are very set in our apprentice program and our journeyman refresher program. Our journeyman refresher program is amazing, but our apprentice program is just bursting at the seams, and so anyway, but it's awesome. We got 4 full-time instructors at that facility, and so. But as far as the name is interesting that you asked me the name, because the name actually came from a dream. It was actually the guy that I was working for when I was at the college. He had a dream, and he came in one night. He said, "Hey, I know what your school's going to be called." So anyway, he said it's going to be called Colts, and Central Ohio Line Worker Training School. I said, "Well, okay." So we dropped the S and said, "Okay, there it is, Colt." Got our logo, and it's been Colt ever since. When we departed from the college, we had some MOU problems at the college, so we had to go our own way. We're now partnered with WVUP, West Virginia University out of Parkersburg. Okay, but anyway, we lost our relation with Marion Technical College, and so but they let us carry over the name. So now it's Colt of OEC. So
wow.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. I've had a couple of folks reach out to me as far as getting some ideas for a training facility, and Mr. Dwight here, he has actually collaborated with them in the past regarding that, and I know you've sent me some of the drawings and everything as well, because we're
available to anybody that wants them. I mean, it's like everything we have. Anybody listen out there, things that we have, it's to give. We're all about making the industry better. So absolutely.
Yeah. So feel free to reach out to Mr. Dwight here, and looking forward to your presentation, brother.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here, man.
Make it happen.
God bless you, man.
You
I love you, Brent.
Okay. Take care, brother.
All right. Very good. So I want to talk today about avoiding unintended consequences in the evolution of safety. This is the first time I've done this presentation. And it's been really busy ever since the hurricane hit for me. And so anyway, so I actually didn't start working on this until about 2 days ago, and it was limited at that. But in my mind, it's like, here's kind of what I want to do today, okay? I want to talk about the evolution of safety, why it's necessary, but I also want to talk about kind of what we got to watch for, okay? As our safety programs get better, as we evolve, as we step into kind of that new era, really, of safety, it's like, what does that look like, okay? So that's kind of the approach you want to talk about today. So the first question I have for you is, why is safety evolving? Why is safety evolving? Well, I believe it's evolving because it's necessary. I mean, we always need to be improving, and regardless of anything that we're doing, we need to be improving. We need to say, how can we stay up with the times? And I mean, to me, it's all about society changing, okay? It's about the generational changes, you know? So you think about it like this, okay? So say that you have a square peg and a square hole, right? Well, what happens when that square hole starts becoming circular? Okay, well, we keep on, and now we're putting that square peg, and now we're getting a hammer in and trying to get it in, and pretty soon it just doesn't fit in good at all. And so anyway, really that's what this is about. It's like, okay, what is the hole evolving into? Because we need to fit that, the mold, the way that things are evolving, that we need to make things work for that. Now, one of the interesting things and things that we really need to consider in that is that things are evolving differently everywhere. So in other words, think about rural Ohio where you know, our co-ops are. And by the way, thank you to the Ohio Cooperative. I love our Ohio Cooperatives. We have 24 amazing co-ops, one in West Virginia that we serve, and so love those, just an amazing family there. But you think about an Ohio co-op versus a California IOU, okay? Think about the difference there. It's like, wow, there's a huge difference in that. So therefore, what works for Ohio in the rural area is probably going to look very different than it does in California for an IOU. Is either one right or is either one wrong? No. You're only right if you adjust to what you're doing in your situation. And I think it's really important that we take that approach as safety does evolve. And so anyway, the other thing is that humans make mistakes, you know, and we make lots of mistakes. Culture drives behavior, and our response to failure matters. Okay, so those are things that we've learned. Okay, and those are things that now are coming to light in the midst of everything evolving. You know, and so one of the things that one of the things that I want to make clear today is that I don't regurgitate things. Okay, I take things that work for us and I try to make them work for us. So what you're hearing today is not going to be a regurgitation of somebody else. It's going to be some of the changes. I just want to go through some of the changes that we've made in Ohio, and some of the things that I've seen where it's like, ooh, we better be careful while we're making this change here. So anyway, so what's an unintended consequence? I mean, when we talk about safety, unintended consequences of safety, that's, you know, we need to be careful, okay? Because it's an unexpected, in the negative sense, it's an unexpected detriment occurring in addition to the desired effect of the policy. So in other words, we go to correct something, right? Something's wrong, okay? So we go to correct it, but there's something else that happens when we correct that. So it's like, well, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with that unintended consequence? Do we know it? And so I'm going to talk more about that toward the end, okay? But I'm going to go on the proactive end of it first, okay? So in the evolution of safety. So I'm going to go over 7 things. So I got 7 questions for you, okay? As your safety program, when you think about it and as it is evolving, I just got 7 questions, and I want to ask, you know, in the sense, the way that we have seen things for ourselves in Ohio. Whether it's right for you, I don't know. You know, but my question is, number one, my first question is, are we managing safety programs, or are we managing programs safely? You say that's just kind of like words, and it's like, really, you know, are you going to try to make a point out of that? My point is this, okay, is that I don't believe, I'm going to go back there, my point is this. Personally, for me, the evolution of safety, here's what I think we're going to see in 10 years. In 10 years, I think we're going to see no safety directors. I think we're going to have compliance and regulatory folks that are working at our utilities, at our contractors, and that type of thing. But I believe that safety is going to evolve in the sense enough where we're actually, anybody that is in a management position of any kind, or supervisory position even, that they are going to be the safety managers. They're going to be the safety directors, they're going to be the safety supervisors. That's where safety is going. And you say, you know, what do you mean by that? Okay, well, I want to ask you this, okay? Is it operations plus safety, really? Is it operations plus safety, or do you just operate safely? So in other words, like, okay, at Colt, okay, Brent mentioned Colt, you know, our training. We don't teach safety as a separate thing. Okay, so in other words, what I want you to think about is safety viewed at your company? Is it viewed as something extra, or is it just part of the process? Okay, because if it's something extra, then we got a problem. And I'm going to show you what will happen if it's looked at as something extra, okay? And now I'm going to say if you have a safety guy, okay, it's kind of like an extra. It's like, we can do away with that safety guy, right? You know, so in other words, if something's extra, do you really have operations plus safety? Because here's what I've seen, okay? What I've seen is I've seen it fall apart in middle management, okay? You have good intentions up top. You have good intentions with the senior staff and everything, but it's middle management that has to execute your safety program at that middle management level. And so if safety is seen as something extra, is it really operations plus safety, or is it operations plus get her done? Because that's what I have seen in some locations. It's like we're just getting the job done, and it's like the safety is just an enemy of all things good. You know, all things that, all progress, and I've heard over and over about, oh, we're just not getting these things rebuilt at the pace that we used to. Well, my take on that is a couple things. Number one, we do have a different generation working. But number two, if we're getting things done at the same pace that we used to get done 15, 20 years ago, then I think we got a problem, because safety has evolved enough where the guys are taking extra steps. And if they're not taking those extra steps, it will allow them to get done the same amount. But it is going to impede some efficient, or some, as far as getting the work done, it has slowed down. But that's not all bad, okay? Now there's a number of things in that, okay? But this is something definitely to watch out for, is the get her done mode, okay? So let's just operate safely. Because when we operate safely, that's what, when we talk about, when folks talk about, is safety a value or is it a priority, okay? They talk about a priority can move, right? You know, so it's like, well, it's number one priority. Well, it's number one priority until we have 11,000 members out, you know, at a 20,000 member cooperative. Okay, now all of a sudden it takes a back seat. No, operating safely is a value though. It's like, what it does is just encompasses, it is weaved through the organization. And so what we want is, we want safety to be weaved through operations, because that's where our exposure is. We can talk about office safety and all those things, but the fact of the matter is our SIFs, our serious injuries and fatalities, those are coming from the field. And so so where we have to be so careful is when we're talking about safety evolving in the field. And I have a question for you at the very end of the program also as well, about safety evolving in the field. So anyway, okay, question number 2. Are we just checking the box? Are we just checking the box, or do we have we developed a standard of care? So, in other words, are we taking a compliance-based approach? Okay, where it's like, okay, yeah, we got to get these things done. Compliance is necessary, we know that. You know, there are certain things, there are certain boxes that we have to check. And so anyway, but with that, we can kind of miss the boat, because what we can do is we can begin to focus on the compliance, okay? And so what we want is we want to develop a standard of care. We want a brothers in arms, our brother's keeper. We want to develop that culture of caring. I have 2 slides here. We got with 2 leaders that truly care about their organizations, right there, and then this here, and Kent's a very close friend of mine. He's the CEO for Buckeye, where some bad things happened. And so anyway, and that place is 180-degree turned around, because it's turned into a culture of caring. And so I've seen that work firsthand, and it's amazing to watch that work. And so anyway, relationships between all employees at all levels is essential to establishing a culture of care. All right, my third question. Is it, hey, obey the rules, dummy? Or do we set clear expectations? So in other words, okay, do you throw the safety manual out in front of them and say, yeah, read this, follow it? Is that your approach? And then when something goes wrong, it's like, hey, you weren't following the rules. You know, you got to follow the rules, stupid. And so what we want to develop is, we want to develop where we are actually setting clear expectations. And so, you know, we talk about accountability, and accountability is necessary, but accountability has to come through clear expectations. If it doesn't come through clear expectations, then our accountability is faulty, okay? It is faulty. That has to be established. There has to be an understanding. It's like, how clear are we in our expectations? So in other words, okay, so as you guys know that your safety rules, it's like there's so much involved in so many things. So my question is, okay, what about on the company end of that, of your safety policy? On the company end of your safety policy, what are we doing to make sure that we have conversations often about what the right thing to do in the right situation is? And the other thing is too, is that the environment that our people work in, it's messy. It's messy. And it doesn't look like that book. You can open the book and you can look at it and it's like, it doesn't look like that. You know, it's like, wow, okay, yeah, doesn't kind of match this right here. And so it's like, how do we adjust? You know, how do we have conversations often in order where our guys are, where the expectations are clear, so that if something does go wrong, it's like, no, they knew, they understood well. We talked about it many times. Or rather than, hey, you know, yeah, we talked about it one time. You know how many times it takes to begin learning something? 7 times. I mean, that's what we talk about in our department with our guys doing safety meetings. You know, they'll say, we just talked about that. I'm going, how many times did you tell them? We probably said it 2-3 times. I'm going, 7 times, you know, 7 times. That's what we have to understand. It's like, it takes a long time to be able to get through, and you got a new employee. How are you doing safety onboarding with your new employees? I mean, safety onboarding with a new employee with experience is critical. You think about what they're bringing in, the culture that they're bringing in with them. And if we don't take that and grab a hold of that and say, we're going to make sure that you develop our culture here. It's like, okay, that's great that you got experience. That's one of the reasons that we brought you in. However, this is the way that we do things in this area. And we go over our life-saving rules. There's a clear understanding on exactly the most important things. So question number 4. This is an easy one because I think we're doing this across the board. I mean, I haven't seen it hardly not happening, but my question is, are we catching or are we coaching? Okay, so, and I think we're coaching. I think like everybody's coaching. But so I'm gonna ask you a question about this though, because I know everybody's coaching, but I also know that coaching isn't going well everywhere. So in other words, we have some coaching in the field, and maybe we have some people coaching that shouldn't be coaching. We did a survey back last year. It was a little bit more than a year ago with all of our co-ops. I did it with all the linemen. It was a very extensive survey. I did it at each co-op. And so anyway, and one of the things that we found out is that if there is someone coaching in the field that doesn't actually have the work experience, it's a very negative thing. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a part for people that don't have the actual work experience. I'm not saying that at all. However, I'm saying if you have people coaching on the things that are really hard, difficult to know unless you've actually done the work, unless you've been in that situation yourself, there's not going to be the respect, you know? I mean, there's just a certain amount of respect. It's like, you know, you've never even done this and you're telling me how to do my job here? And so it can be a very negative thing, and it's just something we got to be very careful with. When we're talking about coaching, as we've moved into that full force in the industry now, into coaching, it's like, how are we actually coaching? Are we doing it effectively? So anyway, I'm going to move past that. You know, I love this here. This slide here, I like it because this is just, I just took this last week or 2 weeks ago. This is a right-of-way crew that we have. And the right-of-way crew, they did an amazing job. And then afterwards, we had Phil Kelly there, and he was doing the coaching with them. So we watched him work for about 3 hours, I think is what it was, and then he ended up doing the coaching and say, okay, here's what I saw, you know, and here's some things to think about. Here's what you did amazing at, and here's some things that you might want to take a look at. So this is the credibility that you want with your crews, okay? Now this guy here is amazing. Philip's amazing, you know, an amazing guy. And so you're not always going to have that credibility. I'm not saying that you have to have that type of credibility where you're bringing someone in from somewhere else, but I'm saying that you have to have enough credibility where you can have those conversations where the guys are open and they're talking openly about it. And so question number 5, okay, for you, is it what happens on the crew stays on the crew? Is it what happens on the crew stays on the crew? Or is there safe and open communication? I want you to be honest about that. And if you say, well, no, we have open communication, it's safe. So my question is, how do you know that? What do you gauge with open communication? Because I'll tell you, this to me, this is the big one. You can mess up on a lot of other things, but everything, like the evolution of safety for us has ultimately been to open up the communication where it's safe to speak. And so I'm going to give you a gauge, okay? And so if you have open communication, my question is this: when is the last time you heard somebody that actually admitted to breaking a safety rule, actually violating a safety rule through human error? They're not going to say it if they did it willfully. Okay, I took a shortcut. You're probably not going to hear that. Okay, you might at times, if you make it safe to say that, you will definitely hear that in certain conditions. Excuse me. But with that, so when's the last time that you ever heard somebody say it? Because the fact of the matter is when we go out there to look at the crews in the real world, you're going to see things that aren't done right all the time. You're going to see things where the guys are messing up. You're going to see the guys mess up in their mind. You're going to see, at times, you're going to see willful violations because it's okay to do wherever they're doing it. You permit it, so you promote it also. Okay, so they're going to be willful violations because of those things. We're going to talk about willful violations because that's extremely important in the evolution of safety, is willful violations. And so anyway, if you have not heard somebody saying something about their own faults, then I would say you don't have safe and open communication yet. Now, that brings in a whole nother thing, okay? Because what it does is it introduces in another huge piece, which is humility, okay? One of the things that we have to, if we're going to advance in safety, one of the most important things is that there has to be a level of humility at every level. Top of the organization, all the way to the bottom of the organization, all the way to in the field, all the way to the new guy you just put on. And I would just ask you, is humility even something that you even think about when you hire? And if it isn't, why not? I mean, arrogance and pride, they're like the foundation of what gets people hurt all the time. Like, I don't need to do it that way, you know? And so there's that arrogance and pride and ego. Now I'm saying we all got issues with pride, right? I fight pride every day. And so, but the problem is that if we have a lot of egotistical guys, especially leaders in the field, that becomes a real problem. So the safe and open communication is very much two-part, you know, and so in that. All right, so anyway, I could go on and on about open communication. I do want to ask you this also, okay? I'm going to give you another question on it. Is so with your open communication, how do you nurture that? I mean, like when nuts and bolts, how do you nurture that open communication? Because if you don't give the right avenue, it's not going to happen. Even if you have the culture of open communication, if that right avenue isn't there. So in other words, to me, here's where we're at in Ohio. Weekly safety meetings in-house, where once a week you have open communication, you talk about everything. We put out what we call a safe talk every week. And so anyway, I put it out every Thursday morning. So it's an incident that occurred somewhere at some point. And then that gives them something to begin that meeting with. And then they can have a meeting where it begins open communication. We had one of our co-ops that began doing that in the last several months. And the senior staff would come in, you know, so you had the whole organization, you know, that would show interest in that. And they said, you know what? They said, it now feels like everybody around here cares about safety. Nothing changed except the fact that they did that, and now everybody was engaged at that level. So the culture didn't necessarily change, but they began actually having and putting actually nuts and bolts to how they could openly communicate. And so you guys know when the stresses occur, when the problems occur, it's when you don't have communication with someone. It's all about communication. And so if we're not giving the avenue of communication, it's like there's these imaginary things happen in linemen's minds, let me tell you, okay? And so just listen to their conversations in the field. It happens a lot, you know? So anyway, so how often are you doing effective in-house meetings where people are talking? All right, that brings me to question number 6. Do you have a culture of blame, or do you have a culture where people are part of the solution? Okay? So, all right. So in other words, you know, you know the old school. When something goes wrong, it's like, bad employee. We got to get rid of that bad employee when something goes wrong. So now we've moved to what? Where people are part of the solution. One of the things that we're really, and I actually almost did it, Brent. I actually almost did, we were actually going to do after action reviews. So anyway, but one of the things that we're really getting active with in our state is after action reviews. And these after action reviews are amazing. It's an amazing way to move from a culture of blame to where people are part of the solution. Now we're going to talk on every one of these things, we're going to talk about the counterpart, okay, of the positives that we gain, of some of the negatives that we might encounter. Okay, so anyway, but what we want is we want people to be part of the solution. Otherwise, you're going to shut things down, because I want to show you what happens if you have a human error incident, okay? You have a human error incident and kind of how that whole thing evolves, okay? So let's say a crew is just working, they're trying to do a good job. They're good employees, they're trying to do a good job. So, and you have this incident occur, and it's not good, okay? Nobody gets, it's not a serious incident, but it's an incident, and it's just not a good incident. And so the first thing that happens is the senior safety team discusses the approach. This is how safety cultures, strong cultures, grow stronger. Because when a human error incident happens, there's probably one of two things going to happen. Either your culture is going to grow weaker, or it's going to grow stronger. You have an opportunity before you, and it takes wisdom from the senior leadership. How are we going to approach that? And so anyway, so the senior safety team discusses the approach. I think that's the number one thing that you have to do. Number two, we're going to do an after action review. That after action review, we're going to get everybody in the room, and this is going to be anywhere from a 10-minute to a 6-hour review. It's going to be, we're going to get everybody in the room, and if you want to know more about after action reviews, you guys can email me, okay? Get with me and I'll send you information on it, okay? But anyway, we're going to do an after action review where we get everybody involved in the process. Everybody that was involved is in it, is in the room, and we all talk about it openly, and we try to get better, because isn't that what it's all about? So we try to identify the things that went wrong. It's like, what were some of those things that contributed to it? And then what were even the root causes? You can get down into the root causes, but it's all done in a sense. Here's what I love about it, Brent, is that it's done in the sense that you do away with the unnecessary bureaucracy. I hate unnecessary bureaucracy. And so what after action reviews do is it goes straight to the solution. So there's a lot of things, a lot of times when we're doing incident investigation, it's like there's sometimes that we need to have certain things for legal purposes, okay? We get that. But there's a lot of times where we just need to get better. Most of the time we just need to get a little bit better, and that's what I love about after action reviews. And so anyway, and so we identify the root causes, the contributing factors, and then we come out with the corrective actions. And then we actually work on them, right? We actually give proper time and attention, because one of the most destructive things to culture is when we do this and we go through these things, and then we have this list of 2 things or 3 things. And you know what happens to that list? It gets thrown on the desk. And nobody ever picks it up. Oh, we're too busy. If you're too busy for safety, then you're too busy to run a contracting firm. Then you're too busy to run an electric utility. Too busy to run a co-op. Too busy to run an IOU. Too busy to run a muni. It's like if you're too busy to take care of the things and get better at the things because something happened, it's like if we're not going to take advantage of the things that happen where nobody gets hurt, then we're in big trouble, because the things are going to happen. Eventually it's going to happen where someone is going to get hurt. So we give the proper time and attention given to the corrective actions. And then we identify the organizational weaknesses, we address them, and then we state our expectations moving forward. It goes back to setting the clear expectations, right? Hey guys, we can't do this, okay? This is what happened, and here's what we're expecting out of everyone. And you keep everything positive, and you say, here's the line. Here's the new line, okay? We messed up as part of it before as the organization. It was our bad, okay? It was your bad and it was our bad. It was a combination of all of us. But here's the line right now, okay? We're not going past that line. We got it? We good with that? If anybody does go across that line, it's not going to be good, but don't make us go there. That's the approach that we want. And then we maintain open communication through trust. That's what we do. And so anyway, so you build that trust, and people say, you know what, it's okay. And actually, it isn't just okay to talk, it actually fixed the problem. You know, these after-action reviews, one of the things that happens, it's easy to talk. You know, when we talk about open communication, we talk about, you know, all this interaction. Here's what I've seen with linemen. I'm a lineman myself, okay? So anyway, here's what I've seen with linemen, is that linemen love to blame everybody except themselves. They love to blame the organization, they love to blame the equipment, they love to blame the circumstances. And I am a lineman, okay? So I'm not putting linemen down. I'm just saying that's the default mode, is blaming everybody but themselves, okay? And so, but what we want is we want them to be able to say, my bad, that was me, okay? And I'll make sure that that doesn't happen again from me, okay? That's what we have to get when we talk about open communication. That's where we want to get. So question number 7. This is a big one. I think we're getting there more and more. And do you gauge your safety program more by the absence of injury or the presence of safety? You say, is that another play on words? Oh no, this is a big one. This is a big one, okay? Because if we gauge our safety program by the absence of injury, what it does a lot of times is it helps us to beat our chest if we got the zeros coming, you know? And I just want to say just a word of caution. Anybody that's watching this, I think it's awesome to celebrate your safety program. I think it's dangerous to celebrate a 0. If you're saying we have 0 lost time incidents, we have 0 recordables, you know, and we have that thing going, I think you need to be really careful. I think you need to rethink that. Just because the fact is, it's like, who's going to mess that up? What we want is we want to encourage reporting, right? We want to encourage the reporting. So what we want is, it's like we understand the place of safety metrics, okay? We understand the place of DART. I should have thrown our DART on there. I mean, our DART and our recordables has been amazing. Since 2007, it's just gone down and down, and it's amazing, you know. But you know what? Here's what the safety metrics do. Safety metrics help gauge our culture, okay? So that's a good thing. It's like, wow, you know what? We're making progress here. We want to do that. But you know what? Just because someone goes to work on a meter and it's a rough terrain and they step into a hole that was impossible to see and they twist their ankle, does that mean that your safety program is crap now? Because when we gauge it on the absence of injury, that's what really we're looking at. Those are the types of things that we get wrong. And so when we're talking about the presence of safety, now we're talking about our proactive measures that we have in place. It's like, what do you have in place as a proactive measure? What do you have in place? What kind of job briefings are your guys doing? What kind of internal in-house safety meetings like what we were talking about? What kind of open discussion about the way that you're doing things when it doesn't match the safety manual? You know, I mean, it's like, what discussion does this look like? It's like, it's the presence of safety. It's all these things of safety. I actually have a list of like 15 different things on the presence of safety. And it's like, and if you want that list, I'll be glad to send it to you. And so anyway, safety is the only thing that I know of that we actually gauge by the absence of something. You know, typically if we're going to gauge something, it's like, oh, how much is there? You know, how much of it is there? That's the way we should gauge. That's what we're saying, is we need to gauge how much safety is present on the job site. Not how much safety is absent on the job site. It's like, how much is present on the job site? Because I'll tell you, if we're worried about our injury rates and it's like, yeah, we don't like injuries. We want them to be at 0. If we're not shooting for 0, then what are we shooting for, right? You know, it's like, are we asking for volunteers? No. So we're shooting for 0, but we're careful with that 0. We treat it in such a way, it's like, hey guys, you know, you guys are doing amazing out there, and you know, here's what we got, you know, but here's what we're doing right. Here's how we're being proactive. But so my question is this, you know, when you're asking about this, it's like, what do injury rates, what do they tell us about our blind spots? Because what we've seen with injury rates is we've seen our injury rates go down across all industries, including our industry. We've seen our injury rates go down in Ohio, but the fact of the matter is the serious injuries and fatalities are staying the same. And they're even increasing at times. I mean, last year was horrid, wasn't it? And so it's like, if our serious injuries and fatalities are steady while our injury rates are going down, you guys remember the Heinrich pyramid, right? So in the Heinrich pyramid, it's like if we do away, if we can have less, slips, trips, and falls or whatever, then it's going to stop a fatality up here. Well, we've learned that that is not the case, and so he's like, oh, there is a flaw in that, so we need to understand that. It's like, so in other words, you might have processes on on your life-saving rules that are very bad, but you might be doing very well on your slips, trips, and falls. And so anyway, we see that zero and we get puffed up, and then we get feeling great about our safety program. And the problem is senior staff get feeling great about the safety program when the fact of the matter is you got a crew out there working right now without grounds on the line. So in other words, what do injury rates tell us about our blind spots? Nothing. Well, how do we learn about those blind spots? Through open communication. We have open, honest communication. That's how we get them. So that's how we learn about our blind spots. We make it safe to talk about our blind spots. And so we have proactive, I talked about coaching, right? If we're going to have a coaching program for our crew observations, it has to be active. It's got to be active. We got to know the right amount to do. We got to know the right approach. We got to know how long to be out there in each situation and everything. There has to be a lot of wisdom with that. So anyway, with that, okay? So those were 7 things, okay? Those are things why we want to push forward in the evolution of safety for Ohio, okay? That's been our journey. Those are things that we've learned. Those are things that we're pushing to that we have not attained yet. Some of them we have and some of them we haven't, okay? But those are things that we're attaining to personally. So what's the problem? Well, my question is, how do you manage the trade-offs, okay? Is there necessarily a trade-off every time that we do something? Well, we talked about what an unintended consequence is, right? So we change a policy to correct something. And then in that changing of the policy or practice, a lot of times for us it's going to be a procedure, it's going to be whatever. Maybe it's not a policy. But anyway, something negative happens. So how do you manage that? And who manages it? And so anyway, so for every gain there's a lot of times there's a trade-off. So what I want to do is I want to go through 7 again, and now we're going to talk about the potential unintended consequences of each one of these items, okay? So, all right, potential unintended consequence. So remember when we said this, are we managing safety programs? Are we managing programs safely? Now, here's what we're going to say about that is operating safely, you have to have everyone on board. So in other words, if you have one hole in that, then there's nobody holding that person accountable because really, I shouldn't say that there's nobody holding them accountable. It's easy for them to let the safety slip. And so like we talked about in mid-management, especially with the older mid-management, it's like this can be a problem. And so it's like, so if you're operating safely and you got a person that is a supervisor that is not on board, then how do you deal with that? Because if we have a safety person, then it's like, okay, we kind of identify that and we figure out how we're going to deal with it. But if now we're expecting all of our managers, all of our supervisors to actually be the safety director for themselves, where we're actually operating safely, then now all it takes is one gap in a really important position. And so anyway, so something to think about that. Potential unintended consequence number 2. When we talk about we check in the box or do we actually have a standard of care? Well, here's the problem that I see on that is that a standard of care can be difficult to measure. It's something that you can talk about and you can feel good about it and everything. And so, but my question is how do you know that you have a standard of care? I mean, you can see it, but like, wow, how do you gauge that? I mean, what's the numbers on that? And it's like, yeah, I think we got it. And so it's like when we're moving toward that, so one of the things that I can see on that is that if we have a standard of care and then we take that compliance, we no longer have that compliance-based approach, then you can also have things fall through the cracks. Okay, now we're getting into the ooey gooey things a little bit, right? I mean, seriously, when we talk about advancing in safety, we're talking about a little bit more about feelings. You have to admit that. Because your emotions, your feelings, as the generations come up, that's becoming more and more prevalent. It used to be all the tough guys and nothing was ever worried about with the feelings and the emotions, honestly. I wish I could let you meet the guy that brought me into line work back in 1985. Worked with him for 6 months. He wanted to kill me every day because he hated me so bad. He was this big and he was this big. And he wanted to thump me all the time because he hated me because I didn't know anything. So anyway, with that, we've moved into the standard of care, which is amazing. But are we measuring it? And then also, are we getting the things done? Are we still getting the things done that we need to get done? Okay, because we're saying, no, we're not just going to do the check the box. I refuse that. And I want to go back to like on the positive side of that. If we just make sure that we're doing everything right, we don't really have to worry so much about the legal things, honestly. That's what we want, right? We don't want to have to worry about the legal things. We want to do it right. And anybody that's been on a serious investigation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, quit worrying so much about checking the box, man. Just make sure that everything's being done right at your place. Make sure that the life-saving rules are being followed. It's like those are the things that we got to be watching. And if we can do those things, then we're going to make really good progress. All right. Potential unintended consequence number 3. Is it, hey, obey the rules, or do we set clear expectations? And so the unintended consequence is too relaxed of an approach to safety. It can lead to procedural drift, okay? So I'm going to say this again, okay? We're going to go back to setting clear expectations, okay? I want you to look at that. Setting clear expectations, okay? We say, okay, we're going to set clear expectations. We're not just going to throw the manual in front of them, okay? But let's not get too far from it, because what we want is we want that to be an active part of the conversation. What we want is we want our safety policy to matter. If your safety policy, if you actually have procedures and rules that don't matter, believe me, they're not going to matter. Nobody's going to look at it, nobody's going to care, because everybody knows that that doesn't matter. Because here's what drift looks like, okay? So drift looks like this. So you have, and I'm not going to get into the hazards and everything at the bottom, but I just want to kind of show at the top, okay? So, and this is, I just grabbed a slide out of another one of my presentations here. But anyway, what you end up having is you end up having drift, where you actually have the gap in between what senior staff thinks is happening in the field, what they expect to happen in the field, and what's actually happening in a messy environment. I'm going to talk about that messy environment because it's really real. Every lineman that watches this knows, man, it's a messy environment out there, man. When we get in, especially on storm, you think about all the things that are going around, that our crews are working with right now. It's like it's messy out there. So how do we make this messy thing out in this environment? How do we match it enough to our policy where everybody goes home at the end of the day, right? Isn't that what we want? We just want everybody to go home at the end of the day. And when we have drift like this, and when we slowly gravitate away, what happens is we end up getting arrogant, we end up getting cocky about what we think that we're doing, how we think we're doing. Then throw some zeros on the injury chart. Oh man, now we're doing great, ain't we? We're doing awesome. We got zeros on our dart, we got zeros on our recordables, and all of a sudden someone has a serious injury. It's like, what happened? This has been happening all along. The whole time that you had zeros up there, this is what you had going on. This is why we manage serious injuries and fatalities. That's why we look at them very closely, very differently. I want to thank Bud Branham for my understanding on that. Bud Branham, he was the director of national program for NRECA, and he's the one that helped me so much understand the things about safety to the level that now I understand them. I'm not saying I understand a lot. I'm just saying he's helped me to get where I am at, okay? So anyway, so what we want to do is we want to do away with that drift, okay? We want to get where the guys are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing out on the job. It does take clear expectations, but I just want to say, whatever you permit, you promote. That's just the way it is. It's like if you permit the guys to do certain things in the field that do not line up with your safety policy, that is now your new safety policy. That is the new standard. Because what you're doing is you're throwing away your policy, you're throwing away your current standard and say, hey guys, I know that's what we're supposed to do, but we're not going to do it. Now, if you know me, and anybody from Ohio that's watching this knows this already, it's like if we are doing things out in the field that don't match our policy, then we need to do something about it. There's one of two things should happen. Okay, first thing that should happen is there should be a lot of discussion. And there's going to be discussion of what is the gap, okay? What does it say? What are we actually doing? And it's like, where is that gap at? And then find out, it's like, well, is this, are we out of compliance? Yeah, we're out of compliance with our rules. Are we out of compliance with minimum? We're not out of compliance with minimum. Okay, well, is it a hazard? Even though we're not out of compliance with minimum standards, is it a hazard on our property? Because you guys know that it's like what our safety rules are, it's a number of things. We take the applicable rules from all these different places, but then it's also, our safety rules are a hazard assessment of our location. Okay, that's what is so important understanding. When we make a safety manual, it's like it is a hazard assessment for our people. All right, so whatever we permit, we promote, and that's super important just to remember. It's like, hey, you know what? Are we letting our guys that they're just doing what they want to in the field? That's a really big problem. If they're just doing whatever they want, we let them. We say, hey, they're the experts. That's the other thing on the. I'm going to go back again to the coaching. If we end up having and I think that might be next. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's in here next. Let me see if it is. It is. Okay, so I'm going to go right into it. So that's going to push us right into the next one. Coaching requires a very active observation program with skilled observers and good communication skills. I'm going to say that again, okay? Go say it slower this time. Coaching requires a very active observation program, very targeted, okay? Very strategic, with skilled observers that know what they're looking at, that really understand what they're looking at, that has good communication skills. Now, you can have a skilled observer that has never done the work with good communication skills. The problem is that there might not be that respect from the crew, okay? But here's what I want to say about that, is if you have someone that's never done the work that's out there coaching the crew, and you got guys that have been doing the work up there in the bucket for 30 years, is that observer really going to have the confidence that he needs to talk about those guys about the way that they're doing their work up in the air? I wouldn't. If I had never done line work and I go out to a crew and I think they're doing something wrong. Now the good thing is a lot of you will have people that ask questions, which is what you want, right? You want to be able to ask questions, say, hey, I'm just curious, why did you do that? That's the perfect approach if you're in that situation. Ask a lot of questions, because there might be good reason, there might not be good reason. I found out, I asked a question the other day and there wasn't good reason. They're going, oh my word, we missed that. We totally missed that. And so I'm going, well, it isn't good right now. We got to get that fixed. That has to change for sure, because it was just something that they missed. And so anyway, asking questions, but having the confidence. It's important that we have confidence, that we have a 30-year guy that's up there and he's not doing things right up in the bucket that's going to get him hurt. Then it's important that we have someone on the ground that can coach that through with confidence and with effectiveness. And a lot of times, typically, the best coach is going to be who? It's going to be the supervisor. There it goes back to operating safely, right? That's what we're talking about. When we talk about operating safely, it goes back to the supervisor. The supervisor should be the one in the field coaching. Not saying there's not a place for a safety person that has never done the work. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is they need to stay in their lane. There needs to be understood. It's like, what is the most effective place for this, for us? And a lot of it is going to be have an open, honest conversation among the group. Just say, hey guys, here's the situation. I heard this. Is this a deal with you? Oh no, that's not a big deal with you. No, I really respect this person's, opinion, and here's why, Or no, it is a problem, because that's typically what we heard is, it's a problem. It's a problem at our co-op, So, all right, so I want to get into number 5. So what happens on the crew stays on the crew, or safe and open communication, okay? So open communication minus respect, it will produce brats. I'm sorry, I've seen it. It will produce a culture of complaining, entitlement, and rebellion, and it will just ruin the organization. So it's like, well, we have this amazing open communication. Yeah, but you also have all this complaining, all this feeling of entitlement, and open rebellion of people not doing things that they know that they're supposed to do, because you have this open communication. And so this is a big problem, And so it's like, wow, there has to be respect. Now, one of the things that I always tell new guys out on the crews, I say, listen, one of the things as a new apprentice, as a new groundman, as someone new on the crew, you may end up getting treated like crap on that crew. You're going to teach them how to treat you right off the bat. It's like, hey, you know what? I don't know diddly, you're right, but you ain't going to treat me like that. And we establish how people treat us on a regular basis, whether it's out on the crew or whether it's just us right here. You know, it's like we establish that. We establish that authority, employee, communicate, a relationship. We establish that, and it's like people need to know how far can they go. And it's like if we let people walk all over us with an environment and a culture of open communication, then you have gained nothing. In fact, it might actually be worse. I've seen it be worse. Isn't that crazy? Think about that. So our culture of open communication without respect. So how do we make sure that we maintain that respect? Well, that's a whole nother topic, right? Let's move into 6.1. So potential unintended consequence number 1. This is where do we blame? Okay, do we have a culture of blame, or are people part of the solution? Okay, so here's the first unintended consequence I see out of that. When people are only seen as part of the solution, toxic employees will destroy your organization. Why? Because people matter, that's why. And here's what I've seen. And I've heard the experts talk about it. You know, it's like it's not about the people at all. It's not about this and that. It's not what I see. And I'm just saying this is my experience. And I have seen in a positive environment, in a culture of open communication, culture where where it's not a culture of blame, we've moved past that. What I have seen is I have seen people just ravage an organization because they continue to put up with an employee. And so people matter. And so what we can't have, and that kind of goes back to that respect, does it not? It goes back to the whole respect factor. It's like when people are only seen as part of the solution, toxic employees, they will destroy your organization. And so it's like people matter. The people that you hire matter. What are you looking at when you hire people? Are you just looking at their experience? Did you guys know that the number one reason that people get hired is because of their ability and their experience and that type of thing? The number one reason people get fired is because of their character. That's something always good to remember, is that people get hired because of their skills and ability. People get fired because of who they are. Never forget that. That will make you happy forever if you can hire people with good character. Potential unintended consequence 6.2. When people are only seen as part of the solution and no standard is maintained, safety becomes soft. Oh, this is a tough one. Safe isn't soft. Safe isn't soft. And if you're letting people where there's no standard, you're not maintaining a certain standard, it's like, well, yeah, I know this person did that. And so anyway, it's like, wow, because here's what's going to happen, is you're going to have people willingly violate the most important rules. And you know what's going to happen? They're not going to get in trouble for it. And they're going to do it willingly. And you're not going to make them actually be accountable for those actions. And so what do we make sure? We make sure that safety doesn't become soft as our safety program evolves. And we understand that there are clear expectations. We say, this is the line, and I don't want to even talk about having to cross that. You know what I mean? It's like, we don't even want to talk about what happens if you cross it. Just know that if you do cross it, it's not going to be good. Then maybe someone does cross it, and then your response to that, everybody will be watching when someone crosses that line. All eyes are going to be on you and what you do in that particular situation. So is your safety program seen as soft? And then the potential unintended consequence number 7. On the absence of injury or the presence of safety, well, I'll just say this. If we don't pay proper attention to safety metrics, I've seen a culture of carelessness follow that. Okay? So it's like, so we need to pay proper attention to safety metrics. And what do you mean a culture of carelessness? That's exactly what I mean. Is say, well, we don't talk about being careless. I know, we don't really talk about it anymore, but I'm just telling you, it's there. I've seen it. I've seen it where it's like, if there's not, it's like, hey guys, listen, we're going to make sure that we use the metrics for what they need to be used for, okay? And we're going to use these metrics in such a way that we don't want accidents. We don't want you to have, we do go for 0, okay? But we're gonna treat that properly in every way, and we're going to do all that we can to make sure that you don't get hurt. We don't want you to get hurt. Soft tissue injury, nothing. We don't want you getting hurt. And so the last thing we want is to mess up and have a culture of carelessness follow. Now, with all that said, I want to talk about a life lesson from the generations, okay? So I want you to look here, okay? So here we got the traditionalists, the baby boomers, Gen Xers. This is me and you, Brent, right here. We're on the, because these are all different for where you're at. I was my mom and dad, they were Amish, and they left the Amish church right before they got married, and so I was brought up in a very conservative home. So mine, I mean, ours probably went clear to 1972 somewhere in there on the baby boomers. So anyway, so I'm entrenched as a baby boomer. Okay, but what you have is you have the traditionalists, you have the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, the Gen Yers, the Gen Zers, and then you have the new alpha, right, that like 2010. So anyway, it's changing more quickly now, okay? And so with that, here's what you have from that, okay? Every one of us, when we're raised by our parents, we see the things that they do right, but not near as much as the things that they do wrong, okay? And so what is our tendency? What is our tendency as the next generation? Our tendency is to correct it, right? So let me tell you the endless generation cycle, okay? Every single generation overcorrects problems made by the previous generation, only to create a future generation who will overcorrect the problems they themselves unintentionally produced when correcting the previous generation's problems. I want you to think about that. Okay, I'm going to say that again. That's worth saying again, okay? Every single generation overcorrects problems made by the previous generation, only to create a future generation who will now need to overcorrect the problems that we unintentionally produced when we corrected our parents' problems, okay? So that's what we're saying. So what is the point? The point is we got to avoid overcorrection, okay? So let's hang on to the good and let's push forward where we need to, okay? There's a lot of good things that we've been doing for a while on safety, okay? We got to make sure that we don't throw everything out the door just because, like, hey, you know, you got safety 1 and safety 2, we're going to throw, and safety 1 and safety 2, if you're not aware, you're talking about Eric Hallnagel, Sidney Decker over in Europe, you know, Eric Hallnagel from Denmark and Sidney Decker from Australia. Those are the leading guys, okay? When it comes to safety, those are the guys that have really been pushing in for years now. And they call safety 2, and they call safety 2 and safety differently are slightly different. There is a difference there, but safety 1 is kind of like the old school, safety 2 is like new school. And so what I would propose is you need both safety 1 and safety 2, okay? If you're looking into that, and if you've been reading those books, and if you've been watching videos and that type of thing, it's like, how do we take the best of both worlds, you know? And I'm really going to go back to the people thing. I think the people thing is just so important. I think the standards thing is so important. And so the important thing is that, what did we say right off the bat? We said we're going to adjust to our unique situation, right? So we need to adjust to what we have going. So what is your strategic plan for your company? What is your strategic plan for that? Do you have a group that you can talk about, say, hey, we need to get better here, here's what we need to change, here's what we need to keep, you know, and you do that with wisdom. And if you don't know that, then we get someone in and we have those discussions with a third party in, right? You know, and I think it's really important. But I'm going to give you a test, okay? I'm going to give you a test, okay? So, and you say, are we really where we need to be? Because I talked about some critical things in the evolution of safety, but I haven't talked much about what I think the most important thing is, okay? So there was a procedure that was going wrong. I'm not going to tell you what industry it was because it was not in the electric utility industry. So I'm not going to tell you so that you don't turn off, okay? So anyway, but with that, there was a procedure. And Sidney Decker talks about this. And so anyway, every 13 times that they did this procedure, that they had catastrophic results. Catastrophic results are really bad, you know? So anyway, 1 in every 13. So they decided to bring a team in and say, okay, this is what's happening. We need you to tell us what's going on when it goes wrong. We need you to tell us where the gap is. And you know what they found out? And here's what they found out. They said, you know what? When you, on those other 12 times, the exact same things were happening as what was going on the 13th time. You had shortcuts happening. You had a messy environment that things weren't happening toward procedures. Just like what happens in the field for us. Okay? It's like it's messy. And so there's things that doesn't match the book, right? And so those things were going on in all 13 times. But there was one thing. There was one thing that was happening, okay, that 13th time. And that was that there was not a true speak up, listen up culture in that room. Now, with that, this is really important. We got to get this right, okay? This is the most important part of this presentation, is understanding this. There are 3 things that every leader has to do at every level if you're going to receive feedback. We can say we have an open door policy. We can say that it's speak up, listen up. But I want to say this from Ohio. Speak up, listen up culture is extremely important to us in Ohio. For a lot of people across the nation, through NRECA, it was the flavor of the month. For us, it became culture. Speak up, listen up. However, you can say you have speak up, listen up. But if you don't have a leader that establishes 3 things at every level, you do not have it. You might have that culture as a whole in your environment, but when you have a crew that is out working and the culture on that crew does not match the culture in the organization because of the type of leader that you have out there, then you don't have speak up, listen up culture. If you don't have it where the exposure is, right? If your speak up, listen up isn't where the exposure is, then you don't have it. But it needs to be modeled all the way at the top. But then we also have to make sure that we have the right leaders in place out in the field. 3 things, what are they? I already said one of them. Humility. Number 1, humility. So they have to know that they are not the know-all. Number 2, they have to establish their fallibility. So in other words, it's like, hey guys, listen, I know that I don't know everything. There's things that's going to happen that I'm not going to catch. There's things that's going to happen that I'm wrong with. I need you to speak up when you see that happening, okay? Because I know that I'm not perfect. I try to be perfect, but I'm not. I never will be, but I'm trying to get better all the time, and I need you to bring that in so that nobody gets hurt out on this crew, because I'm responsible for everybody's safety here, but I need your help speaking up. I need you to be a part of the conversation. I need you to keep that conversation alive. Because I'll keep it alive, but I need you to keep it alive also, and I need you to be able to talk to me. Now, you established a 3rd thing when you had that conversation. So you're humble. You said that you're fallible, and you established that fallibility. But number 3, you created accessibility. 3 things: humility, fallibility, accessibility. All right, those 3 things, if you have that, the leaders that actually have those 3 things, you really do have speak up, listen up culture. Without those 3 things, you can say you do, and here's what I fear in the evolution of safety. We have made all these changes in the organization, but I fear that we still have things happening in the field that we haven't corrected in the field. And if those 3 things are not happening in the field by your crew leaders out in the field, then where are we at? Where are we at in essence? So I got some questions I want to ask you before we go, okay? So this is the last slide. Number 1, are toxic employees, and this is just kind of an overall with this thing, are toxic employees currently infecting your organization? If so, then I'd say you haven't evolved as much as you need to. Either that or you threw out the old too much and you're into the new too much. But if you're allowing toxic employees to infect your organization, then that's really tough. Next one. What happened the last time someone was caught willfully violating a life-saving rule? What happened? Say, well, it didn't happen. Okay, then what would happen? What would happen if someone was caught willfully violating a life-saving rule? Because you know what? If you don't have a standard that they have to maintain in the field, then it's going to happen. And remember, whatever we permit, we promote. And so if you're permitting those life-saving rules to be treated like a human error, that cycle was not made for willful violations. Remember when we had that cycle up there? That was not a willful violation cycle. That was a human error cycle. Those are the things where we have open conversation. It gets real direct. When we have willful violations, the conversation gets really direct. It is a totally different approach. Because why? Because our employees are at risk and they are being exposed to the risk where they can get hurt really bad. And it's our job to make sure that they don't get hurt. That's why. 3rd thing, who's in charge? Is there respect for who's in charge? Because if you have open communication to such that everybody else in that organization thinks that they're the ones in charge, then we got problems. If they're running it, are the linemen running the organization? The senior staff just kind of goes along for the ride? That's a big problem. Okay, who's in charge? Number 4, is your safety program seen as soft? Ooh. Say, yeah, but I want it soft. I don't think you do. I don't think you want it soft. We want our safety program, we want it to be solid, man. We want it to be solid, but we want it to be in a great culture. We want to have a great culture of open communication, but we want it to be solid. You know, it's like, no, these are our standards here. You don't understand, man. You're working here at our place. These are our standards, and we're going to maintain these things. 5, do leaders at all levels display humility and establish their fallibility and offer accessibility? So I'm going to ask you about the senior leader. Does your senior leader do that? Whoever's watching this, I don't know what level you're at. Do you do it? Are you humble enough to take that same approach? Does your middle management do it? The one that hands out the work, do they do it? Do your field leaders, do they do it? All it takes is a gap somewhere. One gap somewhere. Humility, fallibility, accessibility. Okay, now we didn't talk about this one. This one kind of slipped my mind. Are all of your incidents investigations effective using the no blame approach? Because here's what ended up happening, okay? They did an analysis of 34 incident investigations, okay, that had been done through this new type of, open communication environment, okay? And what they found out was that the interviewers wouldn't talk about the actual what really happened. And so what they would do is they would end up blaming things that were really didn't have anything to do with it. And so they couldn't get the information that they needed because of the no blame approach. Isn't that pretty crazy? Okay, what they found out was that they were reluctant to unpack the people in the process. And they blamed the things that really were not of consequence, okay? Inanimate objects, organizational procedures, or paperwork that really kind of had nothing to do with it. And so anyway, what they found out was that the 34 incidents, that was the big gap in them, okay? So we want to make sure that that is not the case. So your incident investigation, so we want them to be positive, we want to be open communication, but also we need to make sure that we're getting to all the issues. And I know what that no blame approach is. It's like, well, we don't want to place the blame on somebody. No, but we have to take care of the issues. Okay, we have to make sure that we're taking care of issues. Typically, it is going to be organizational failures. You know, you're going to have a lot of that. But then there are certain things with certain people, and if you don't admit that, I think that you're just lying to yourself. That people matter. If you don't think people matter in your organization, I think you're just lying to yourself. I mean, it's like I've been dealing with 3 people here this morning. You know, I got Victoria right behind the camera. I got Brent over here on the left. I got Jeremy over on the right in charge of the video. These were awesome people. Tell me that didn't set the tone for me for this presentation. It set the tone. Why? Because we had a good time together. We were laughing together. We were having a good time together and everything. If it had been a bunch of grumps out there, if you all be a bunch of grumps, you know what? It would affect me, you know? And so it does. People do matter. All right, 2 more things. Is there evidence to support that changes have happened in the field as your safety program has evolved? Oh, that one hurts. So what's the evidence? I want to know what the evidence is. I mean, when the rubber meets the road, what is that evidence? And you say, no, there is evidence. Well, that's what we're saying. Is there evidence or not? You say, yeah, there is evidence. We definitely know, because here's what they tell us. Here's what we're seeing. It's like, okay, that's evidence. But if nothing has changed, you think that safety has evolved to where it needs to be in your organization, but things haven't changed in the field, then it hasn't evolved except only ethereal, okay? It's like it really doesn't matter. And it's like it makes everybody feel good and everything, and you talk about it and everything, but it really doesn't matter because it doesn't affect what's actually happening out in the field. And then last thing, is your coaching program effective? And do you have people coaching who have never done the task? So, and you say, well, that one's kind of controversial. To me, it's not. To me, it's not. Not what I've seen. I don't think it's controversial. I think what we have to have is we have to have people doing exactly what they need to do in their position. We have to figure out what that is. And I think that there has to be an understanding. It's like, hey, we all have our place. And with that, I just want to thank you all. You guys have been amazing. You stayed with me the whole time, so thank you for staying with me the whole time. So just want to say God bless you all, and we'll see you next time.